Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents Channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, I'm going to be releasing content that I recorded with the banking bro, Jay Do, down in the Greenville, South Carolina studio, where the Banking Bro studio is. And he had particularly wanted to have a conversation with me about a book that he'd read recently. It's one of Nash's suggested readings from his book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And I'd fairly recently already read it myself, so it was just perfect, that opportunity lining up for us to be able to discuss the law. And I have covered that book on a couple of occasions here on our channel, so I'd encourage you to look there also if that interests you. But we covered The Law by Frederic Bastiat. It was a great pleasure for me to have a conversation, of course, with Jay Do. And I hope that you get some value out of listening in on that conversation.
I wonder if a book that was written in 1850 about the law can still be relevant at all today. Welcome back to the Cash Compound Podcast. It's Jay Do and Jesse Durham sitting here in studio. What's up, Jesse?
What's up, man?
Great to see you and hear you here on our podcast. We're in studio here on the East Coast, and I'm always in the upstate of Greenville area, South Carolina. Our headquarters is actually in Greer, but you drove in today. Appreciate you being back.
Yes, sir. Happy to be here.
We're going to get into it, ladies and gentlemen. One of our favorite books, the book that helped us crack the code to cash flow around here, is actually called Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. But he references several other great works. One of them I gave you in the intro, and it was written way back in 1850. Jesse, tell us what this book is and convince me that it's important and relevant today.
Okay, so it's a short book, and I like how it's broken up as far as you're reading a paragraph at a time.
Okay.
So if you're not big on reading, I love having a physical copy, but if you're not big on reading, you could read a paragraph.
Now, I didn't read it. I listened to it, so I did not know that it was paragraph style.
I'll try and not judge you for that.
Hey, man, I'm on the go. I'm helping folks out here get started with their wealth building. So Frederic Bastiat is this man. He's a French economist around 1850. And he says a lot of interesting things. And while I was going through, I was actually cleaning the house, got my AirPods in, whatever they're called these days. And I was listening to what he had to say. And I thought, man, how relevant is what he's saying back there in a different country, 1850, going on now in America. But it really kicks off with, maybe you've got us a quote or paraphrase of the quote. Before we get into his book, what's the similarities between him and Nelson Nash? What does Nelson Nash quote from this guy? Well, why did Nelson, you remember what Nelson said in his book about this guy?
So side note,
yeah,
when you said you were cleaning in the house,
yeah,
I immediately thought of a Jay Do version of Mrs. Doubtfire.
Very good. Toodaloo! Yes. So, all right, that's a whole different podcast.
That's
people.
A whole different deal.
Yeah.
So he mentions
French. Oh my goodness, Jesse, you got us off track.
Players, bad jokes.
This went downhill so fast.
No, I'm gonna bring it back. Stop.
Okay.
We had our fun. Now we're moving on. So when Nelson mentioned Frederic Bastiat is when he was covering the Willie Sutton Law.
Okay.
So when he starts talking about government, law, or autonomy, independence, freedom, that type of thing, when we're talking about that, Willie Sutton's law, and that law states that wherever wealth is accumulated, someone's going to try and steal it. Willie Sutton was an infamous bank robber.
Right.
So that's important, recognizing when Nelson brought Frederic Bastiat and his work in the book, The Law, into the conversation. Yeah.
So going back to Willie Sutton for a second, I believe that quote in Nelson's book specifically about him, before he gets back to the olden days 19th century reference, it's, why do you rob banks, Willie Sutton?
Because that's where they keep the money.
Because that's where they keep the money. And then the meme hits me right here from Denzel. My man. You know what? That's the answer to the question. That's where the money is, right? Follow the money. Okay, so here's the thing. He's not talking about actually bank robbers, train robbers. Who is Frederic Bastiat or Nelson talking about? Who's coming for the money, the accumulated wealth from the individual?
The government.
The government. 3 words. GUB M-I-N-T, the government. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about this. So give us more of a recap and a style, or go into your first point about what is going on here in this book.
Yeah, so the background on Bastiat is he's living before, during, and after a French Revolution.
Yes, right.
Okay, so before it, in the middle of it, and after it. And he was a statesman, as well as being an economist and an author. So that background, I think, is important. And then, of course, tying into why Nelson mentioned it at the Willie Sutton point of his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, because you're seeing human problems taking place with government and revolutions and people and their autonomy and their wealth and their personal property and all these things that are pinned down in the law.
Oh, right. So he makes several solid arguments on what the law is supposed to do. And he says that the law is supposed to protect individual liberty and justice. And the problem is, if the law cannot do that equitably across the board, then it is unjust.
Yes.
It's unjust. It's completely unethical. Yeah.
That justice word, that's it.
Yeah, justice. So explain that.
I wrote down was law is justice.
Yes, law is justice. So explain what that means. And there's a lot of people, I think, in our day and age, 21st century America, who don't view the law as that way. The law is supposed to give us equitable outcomes as opposed to individual freedoms and liberty. So what's your take on that?
So there are plenty of philosophies out there, of course. What I'll resort to here is, I think of, when I read this work, I thought of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? Those documents that are indicative of our country. Again, we're talking about a French Revolution, so there was another country that went through another revolution.
So right after our revolution here in this country, and those documents were written, right? Because the French Revolution, 1789, yes? Storming of the Bastille?
You're on it.
Okay, well, I don't know. Somebody put in the chat out there, did I get that right? Okay, go ahead.
The ideas.
Okay, gotcha. Not the dates.
That's right.
All right.
The dates. Like, you get that in government school. Now we're pursuing our own education.
Gotcha. Okay. Apologize. Continue.
But the idea of, well, life has to be first, because without it, nothing else matters. Okay.
Right.
I mean, you can't be free if you're not alive. So, okay. So life, and then liberty. I think everybody's on board with having freedoms, but what protects freedoms? Laws, justice, having justice. And in the Willie Sutton case, here's somebody who's violating somebody else's liberties, somebody else's pursuit of happiness, and maybe even somebody else's life, and holding somebody up at gunpoint to take them, take their
money
wealth
from them.
That's right. So if law is justice, and I believe it is, I believe law is justice, as Frederic Bastiat said, then that's how we can have, well, so many things. I mean, the country and the experience that we do have, the freedoms that we do have. Law is there to protect it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one example that I want to pose to you, and you explain what you think that this means. If the law is doing something, the law is really a group of individuals, yes? It's the government, it's the people in authority. If they're doing something with the law that an individual cannot do by themselves without being it unethical, immoral, illegal, then the law is immoral and unethical. So help us understand that in the context of finances with the government.
Well, let's just use Nelson's. He lays out this scenario in his Becoming Your Own Banker book of, imagine you're at a mall, or just a place with a lot of people.
There's not a lot of people at the mall anymore. Well, is there? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't been.
Okay, all right.
But I did used to go.
Last time we thought about people at the mall, there was a lot of people. Go ahead.
That's right. That's why I said, or another place with a lot of people. Okay. We're dating ourselves the more we talk about this.
True.
Again, quit. Let's move on.
Okay, gotcha.
So imagine somebody just walks up and at gunpoint demands somebody's private property. Give me your watch, give me your money, whatever. If we see that from an outside perspective, we immediately know that that's wrong, taking somebody else's stuff by force. So that individual is committing an injustice.
An injustice.
To use that word.
Yep.
So the government does that all the time, though. taxation, for example, is compulsory. I mean, I've never been when my wife and I bought property that we live on now. The government didn't send me some opt-in papers on land taxes. For example, it's compulsory.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And there are also guns that back up those laws.
That's true.
So, while I believe in it, I think that we live in a wonderful place for so many reasons. I believe it's the most free country in the world. We still even here see plenty of examples of injustice where government is stepping in and using their force to confiscate other people's private property.
So because of that stifles what we would call the free market. The free market. Individuals being able to willingly contract between each other without third-party intervention, and that intervention being compulsory. Like you have to abide by these things. So are these people capitalists? Is that what it is? Are they anti-fascism, socialism, or whatever? What are we talking about?
Are we talking about the government? Because the government is just simply supposed
to... Well, I meant Frederic and Nelson. Coming from a lot of people out there. The reason I asked that specifically is because a lot of people see the opportunity of infinite banking, what we talk about here and what we teach people at the Cash Compound, becoming your own banker. They see it as some sort of trick. They see it as some sort of investment opportunity special or whatever. But do you feel that's what Nelson saw?
No, I'm certain that's what he wrote a book, so we can know and understand. So if you haven't read Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, start there.
Yep.
And then do like we did. Then do move to his recommended readings to see what did influence his thinking.
Right.
But no, we can readily discern that Nelson certainly believed in private contracts between mutually agreeable, mutually beneficial opportunities between people. Us having the opportunity. I mean, this is an amazing thought. Life insurance with mutual companies that pays dividends, that doesn't just exist everywhere in the world.
Right.
We are a land of liberty. We are a land of law.
Right.
Okay. So we get to experience that here. And Nelson talks about, that you said it so well, how we can just privately contract with these insurance companies and agree to pay ongoing scheduled premiums, and they agree to guarantee us death benefit decades and decades into the future. I mean, what a beautiful relationship that we could just agree to do that between each other.
Now, what do you think Bastiat is saying about the be all end all if the law encroaches upon man's liberties and freedom? What happens in the end? The be all end all, if the law becomes bigger than the liberties of the individuals, where does this lead to? And here's the question that I'm trying to figure out as I'm cleaning up around the house, my French maid suit. There's a long time between 1850 and 2023 as I'm listening to this. Have we already succumbed to all the things that he was talking about, or is there still hope?
Well, if I start at the end and work my way back on that series of questions, great questions. Yes, I'm an optimist. I always think there's hope. I mean, again, if I go back to the beginning of, while there's life, there's hope for liberty, there's hope for law, there's hope for opportunity, there's hope for mutually contracting together. And then, of course, we have to be vigilant. We have to be zealous about knowing what our rights are, exercising those rights. Of course, sure, making sure to vote well for the people that share our interests so that we do have servants in the public sector that are not inhibiting what we want to do for those of us that care about free markets and capitalism and being able to privately contract with people. I mean, I mentioned buying land earlier for where we live now and where we have our family farm and all those types of things. Yep. I didn't force that person to sell me that land, and nor did they force me to pay the price that they asked. They gave me a price. I made an offer. We came to those terms together without any government assistance. That's a beautiful thing.
Right. So what happens if that's not the ability that we have? What does a country look like? What does the economy look like if the liberty goes away?
Well, there are plenty of historical examples, of course. I mean, we are reading a guy's book and talk about a guy's book that went through a literal revolution. Hopefully it can be short of that. Hopefully we can just be zealous with the opportunities that we have, and make sure that have we read and thought about what the Declaration of Independence says? Have we read and thought about what the Constitution says? Are we actively trying to, put our dollars and put our emphasis in areas where the private sector can be, us aligning with other folks that share these same values? And it's a big subject. I mean, even right now, I find myself getting bogged down in all these different questions.
No
you asked
question.
me like 6 questions
Sure.
in that one. But I think it starts with people being vigilant about reading and understanding and knowing, and then trying to align themselves with the government servants or the other private individuals that share their beliefs, so that we can protect these rights, so that we can maintain justice, so that we can maintain laws that protect the individual, because the laws are there to serve the individual.
Right. Well, yeah. Bastiat mentioned socialism a bunch inside his book. So how would you kind of term socialism? What is he talking about there when he says we're headed towards socialism if this is the way the government treats laws and the people? Socialism is next. Socialism. He mentioned that a bunch. Mm-hmm. And I think, generally speaking, compared to the American economy today, we'd all say, oh, well, France is socialistic. It's a socialism system there in his country. But, of course, Bastiat references several different places around the world. What's socialism? What's going on?
So let me give you a quote.
How would we get there?
Let me give you a quote that I wrote down, because I only wrote down a couple. The state... And that's a phrase that it uses a lot. The state is that great fiction whereby everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. So socialism is where the state is dictating a lot of things that I believe should be left in the hands of the individuals to make for themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's just the opposite of the private rights and opportunities to pursue our own happiness that we can cultivate for ourselves, versus being told it's going to be this way or that way or the other way.
Right. Okay. So do you think that Nelson and Frederic would have been on the same page if they lived in the same time? Obviously, France is not a place where mutual insurance companies contract with individuals for guarantees in the future. So what are the similarities between these guys, do you think, if they were in the same contemporary period?
Well, they each wrote a book to encourage other people. And here we are talking about their works, which is just really interesting to me. But here we are talking about so they did their part, right, to codify ideas about how you could privatize your banking, or ideas, and sharing their experiences about, I've never lived through a revolution. Frederic had. So they put forth the work to try and reach generations into the future. So I think by us having the same kinds of conversations about the things that they wrote about that are, when is justice or law or liberty or the pursuit of happiness or any of these other themes going to go out of style or not be relevant? They're always going to be relevant. Yeah. And, for the people that we talk to that are looking to pursue financial freedom, then Becoming Your Own Banker is the manual on how to do that. And then those related works that Nash references, like the law, are where he was influenced from. So I think it's all pertinent. I think it's all relevant. I think it's all very cool. When you told me that you wanted to have a conversation about the law, I got really excited, because I had actually, by coincidence, you had no way of knowing this, recently read it. And then you told me that you wanted to do an episode on it. So I was really excited about that.
Love to hear it. Okay, so one of my final questions here is, what do we do with this information? Where do we go from here? What Frederic wrote down was more of an idealism, and what Nelson Nash talked about was putting boots on the ground, right? So how do we take what Frederic says? We're already putting our boots on the ground with Becoming Our Own Banker, right? We're practicing the infinite banking concept and learning toward what you just mentioned, the liberty of economics, right, on a personal standard. What do we do now on a larger scale? Frederic is talking about the systems of thoughts and mindsets and government in multiple areas, not just financials. So what do we do with this information?
I think it's interesting that I first got exposed to infinite banking in 2015.
Okay.
And we're in 2023.
Right.
And I've just now gotten around to reading the law. Now, I don't feel like I have been lazy in my reading or my study, but Nash just had so many suggested readings that I just happen to have gotten to the law now. So I think the first steps are, if you've not read the law, you need to read the law. You need to read the Declaration of Independence. You need to read the Constitution. You need to read Nash's second book, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, and then check out what other suggested material he has at the end of his Becoming Your Own Banker book. Another one is, and it's a 1,000-pager, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
I've not gotten to that one.
I read that one. It's terribly interesting. It's so interesting for me to, and I know it's not even the 1800s, but it's the early 1900s or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, how is that stuff so relevant? I mean, I feel like she's talking about stuff that's happening today. And I read that last year or the year before or something. I'm like, how is that still so relevant? And it's like she's talking about today. It's not like she's talking about then. So I think the first step is just by continuing, not arriving, deciding not to arrive, deciding to continue our own education by reading and having quality conversations about this stuff in the first place.
I love it. Okay, any last words you want to give us? I think you took one or two more notes. What else do we need to know? And what can Jesse give to us here from his thoughts on the law?
One of the last things I guess that I'll mention is that life, liberty, this is what I wrote down from one of my takeaways. Life, liberty, and property, all of which are mentioned in the Declaration of Independence for our country, for example. Because again, remember the context. We're talking about a man's experience through a revolution, and not even in our country.
Right.
But we have this Declaration of Independence that talks about life, liberty, property. He says that they supersede the laws of men. So if there's a law out there that's trying to supersede my right to life, my right to liberty, my right to personal property, it's an injustice. And we do need to fight back against that. We do need to push back against that.
Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, I love to hear it. So many interesting thoughts. As we mentioned, what is relevant today because of these ancient works, really, in our modern day? So that's probably the earliest ancient times we can come up with. Our country had just been formed. This man had been through a revolution, as Jesse said, and he put some economic codes into the strains of his pages to help us understand where we are, who we can be, and how the government might not be our best friend in that process. So we encourage you to check out the law and, of course, read Nelson's book so you can understand what's going on in the Becoming Your Own Banker infinite banking concept story as well. That field guide is something we'd love to walk you through. So if you want to practice this economic freedom in your life, give us a call, jump into the chat, watch our presentation, and we'll talk to you very soon on a one-on-one free consultation. We'll see you on the next episode.
So I hope that you enjoyed that glimpse into Frederic Bastiat's work, The Law, with Jadu and I talking about some of our takeaways and some of the aha moments and some of the points of interest for us. If you had a particular point of interest, I'd love to hear about that in the comments section. And if you'd like to have a conversation about how to implement this infinite banking concept into your household or your business or your investing because of the things that we're learning by reading books like Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash and reading The Law by Frederic Bastiat and seeing how that influenced Nash, if you'd like to have a conversation about what this could look like for you on your home front, then don't hesitate to get in my calendar and let's have that conversation. And this would be really helpful. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and share. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. That really would be helpful, and I enjoyed this time with you. I look forward to our conversations in the future. Have a great day. Take care. You're relying on a machine
We hitting this one or no?
to tell you what to think about the law.
Okay. Love it, man. Great.